everyone. Welcome to today's edition of the Gamut Network. I am, as I know I say every interview, but I am so excited for this interview because I intend to learn right with everybody. This is a topic that I am extremely interested in and so excited to learn from this beautiful guest of ours. Britney Wolf is here, and she's going to tell us all about Tourette Syndrome, her involvement in association, and then we're going to get to know Britney a little bit by the end. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. Anytime I get to anytime I get to talk to anybody and teach them about Tourette Syndrome is a good day in my book. So
fantastic. Well, let me also just first start that admittedly, because I always like to be as candid as possible. I actually thought it was Tourette's syndrome. Do other people feel that way? Do you ever hear that?
I do. I hear that a lot. And I think it's more because just it flows so much.
Yeah.
It does. It just kind of, that S is right there at the beginning.
Yeah.
I know I'm just talking about it as Tourette. I tend to say Tourette's. It flows off my tongue a little better. So that's the way I say it.
So I'm happy to hear that you sometimes say it too, because
yes.
before the interview, I practiced a little bit. I'm like, it's Tourette.
Yes.
So perfect. So when were you diagnosed with Tourette syndrome?
So I was diagnosed when I was 7, and I'm 31 now. So I've been living with my diagnosis for quite some time.
And how quickly would you say, I guess, your parents or your support system, did they react fast? Did they think that you were going to grow out of it? Tell us a little bit about that.
When I was younger, so I started making my mom explained it as she just noticed that I wouldn't sit still as much, even when I was just watching television or something. And she started realizing that it wasn't just me being a kid, not being able to sit still. I was doing it when I was zoned in. So sometimes I would move while I was watching TV or anything like that. And then when I think back to it too, my grandma and my papa, they used to babysit us while my parents worked when I was younger, me and my older brother. When I think back to those moments, my grandma used to tell me to blow my nose all the time, constantly. Brittany, blow your nose. If you have to blow your nose, just do it. Stop sniffing all the time. And looking back, we realized that was actually a tic, because even as a little kid, I remember telling her Grandma, I don't have to. I don't have to blow my nose. And so then she would say, stop sniffing. And if you talk to her today, she would tell you how bad she still feels about that. Even though I tell her, Grandma, nobody knew, it's really not a big deal. But yeah, so they noticed that. And then in order to be diagnosed, you have to have symptoms for a year before it to actually Tourette syndrome. There could be other tic disorders that it could be smaller. I'm not a super expert on that part of it. Not that I'm a super expert on Tourette's, but
well, you're more than I am. So there you go. In this conversation, you are the expert.
Yes. And so I started going to a neurologist. My mom saw an episode on a talk show long ago, and my mom started putting pieces together. I think this might be what Britney has. And so she actually took me to my regular doctor, and they weren't able to do anything there. So they got my mom a referral for me to go start seeing a neurologist, because that's generally who gives a diagnosis out. And so I had to keep seeing her for a year. I don't remember a ton about the appointments. I remember getting a blow pop sucker every time I went. That's what I remember most about these appointments, because I was a child. So that's what I looked forward to when I went. But yeah, I had to go there for a year, and I had to present physical and vocal tics in order for the Tourette diagnosis as well. And my vocal tics are very minimal. Only those that are around me all the time, my parents or my husband would ever mostly hear those, unless it's one of my grunts sounds that I do with a tic.
Yeah.
Other than that, I make a sound where I say it sounds like a squirrel, but I don't
if you do it during the interview, can you alert us to it?
Yeah, I don't do it very
often. It's a cute little giggle or something, but yeah. I would be curious to know what that sounds like. But help us understand, you're diagnosed at 7, 8, I guess 9, based on the year-long span. What was that like you? What were the challenges of being an adolescent with something that I would imagine kids and probably most adults really didn't understand?
I think the challenge was being around people that were outside of my family. I am very, very blessed with a huge and supportive family. All my family, they never acted like anything happened. Anything was different. I remember talking to my mom about this and saying that I don't remember you or grandma or my aunts and uncles like ever saying or like seeming worried or anything. And she's like, well, I asked everybody to not make it a big deal, especially around you, because she didn't want me thinking anything was wrong with me. She just wanted me to know, like, this is what I have and it's okay that I have it. And we would find our way through it. So, but the biggest challenge, was like going to school and realizing like it was always weird for me to think, even thinking back, that I am now like the one teaching my teachers about something that they didn't know about.
That's really interesting. That is very, very interesting, because I bet a lot of people that I do the interviews with would probably feel the same way. I know for my son specifically, he's teaching everybody, about he's so rare, his condition, that it's the same thing. It's a really perfect way to say it, that he's teaching people every day.
Yes. Oh yeah. Every single day. And I think that's a struggle even as getting older. Like there's just days where you don't want to have to explain yourself.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to have, I love talking about Tourette syndrome. I love teaching people about it. It is my biggest passion in life, I would say. But there are just some days where people will ask me like what I'm doing and I just kind of brush it off. I'm just like, I don't want to get into the whole spiel today.
It's exhausting.
Yes.
And, he's about to be 17, but still it's exhausting, and it's a source of anger sometimes that for that reason, that it's like, I just don't want to explain it today. And I'd rather just say, not say anything, and that's okay too. Right. Yeah, so definitely. Would you say that that's probably that is aside of the physical aspects from a mental capacity, that's a challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what people don't sometimes realize is that this exhausts us from like every single aspect, physical, mental, and emotional. You're constantly wondering when you're going to get the next break, if you get one. And now I have a mild case, but it's gotten worse as I've gone into adulthood. When I was younger, my neurologist actually told me it would go away by my 20s. And I was so excited when I was a little kid, just thinking about the day when I could have my body back. And then I got into my 20s and I was in college, I was working full time. And then on top of that, I, for whatever reason, decided to also plan my wedding and buy a house all at the same time through part of it.
Yeah, I get that. I tend to do everything at one time too.
Yeah. And so it got really bad. And I was actually ended up being on the highest dosage of medication I've ever been on in my life for it, because I was so stressed out. And tics, they react so strongly to stress for me. Stress and excitement are actually my two biggest triggers for my tics to just
that they will increase the tics.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
And I have actually a question on that. Do new tics happen, or is it the tics that you already have just get exponentially more prevalent?
Both can happen. So I could develop a tic while we're sitting in this interview, like while we're talking, a new tic could come out if it wanted. I never know. I have different tics from when I was a kid. I have some of the same tics from when I was a kid. And so when I get excited or overly stressed out, mostly excited, that's always been I'm a very excitable person. I get excited about little things over the top. So, but my tics, they could become more complex. So I could start ticking with multiple body parts at the same time. So it could be the same tic I've been doing for years, but maybe now I'm moving my hand with it, or maybe now I'm stomping on the ground at the same time. Or it could be a brand new one. So in April, I was very excited to go on this vacation. We go out of town a lot. It's one of our favorite things to do together. So I was so excited to finally do it again. And I was so excited. I developed a new tic, and it was with my breathing. I was sniffing like in and out over and over and over and over again. And I would have to, that one gets a little frightening too, because I start to lose my breath and I have to try and force myself as hard as I can to stop myself so I can breathe again. It created so much of like my sinus like issues, and that day it didn't give me my sinus problems, but I had such a bad, terrible headache from it, because like I'm sniffing in and out, so I feel it all through here. At the end of the day, I went to my mom and dad's house because we always go to see them before we go on vacation, and just seeing them makes me feel better. I was sitting there with my mom and I'm like, I feel like I ran a marathon today. Like I am so tired. And I had to leave work early that day, which I hate doing, but I just couldn't do it. We're in a virtual world now, so I'm on meetings a lot, and I couldn't talk pretty much. So I just had to call it a day, and I had to figure out how to be okay with that because I struggle when that happens.
Absolutely. And that's a very big piece of it as well. I know that you said this earlier, how it affects, physically, mentally, all of the above, emotionally, that it also then kind of goes out to your performance or how you feel your performance is at work or at school, etc. And that's a very big piece, actually, that we just did a panel discussion on for a brand that we work with, is the cross section between mental health and disability, because it's extraordinarily important and embedded in that, and this is a perfect example of that. But just let's talk specifically about kind of the world we've all been living in, but certainly exponentially for you, I'm sure, is how did COVID affect? Did it help in that all of our worlds got very small, or did it add stress? How did that affect everything?
It definitely added a lot of stress. So as you mentioned, mental health is a big part of disability. So I struggle a lot with anxiety. For a very long time, I didn't even realize some of the stuff I was struggling with was even anxiety, until I started talking to somebody and figuring all that kind of stuff out. And I'm a worrier. I worry about things that I know I can't control. We all can't control this. We can't control the world, the country, whatever. And so it was very stressful for me knowing I couldn't see my family, knowing I couldn't go visit my grandparents, especially. I'm very close with my grandparents. I'm close with my whole family. So not seeing them killed me. Not being with them for family functions, I was just so upset, like so monumentally upset. And so, yeah, that creates my tics to be a lot worse. Sometimes during the moment of stress, like if I have like a few days, like it's almost like the tics take a back seat. And then once I get like a sigh of relief or something, they like come full force. Other times it's during all of that. It's just a matter of what my body decides to do. And I remember there was one day where just, one tiny minuscule thing, it set me off into such a meltdown, I will say. To be honest, I was trying to go and get some blood work. I was so nervous about going to get blood work because I was so in my head about going anywhere, because I'm also a person that has a weakened immune system for reasons outside of Tourette syndrome. And it didn't work out. And I have a history of my medical stuff not going the way I had hoped or planned. And after months of this, and then that happened, it was just, I was crying. I was sobbing. Like it was as if my whole world just imploded over this one tiny thing, but it wasn't that. It was everything ticking. I was stressed. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know when I was going to get to see my family again and hug them and be with them. And it adds so much more stress. And then you're worried because as a person with Tourette syndrome, triggers are sometimes something as small as you not being able to do something, knowing you're in a quiet area and you shouldn't be making noise or you shouldn't be moving or anything like that. That can be as small as enough as it is for a trigger. Now, being told not to touch your face or not to cough or anything like that, a lot of people with Tourette syndrome have clearing of the throat tics and coughing tics. And it's enough to trigger that person that you can't cough. Like in public, you don't want to be that person at the store coughing.
Right. It's during COVID for sure.
Yeah. And so that was a struggle a lot of people with Tourette syndrome had, and they started getting, thankfully, the Tourette Syndrome Association, which is an amazing organization. I have worked with them through projects and have done fundraising events for them for years. I'm planning another one for this fall, actually. They had cards that they would give out so you can have it if you ever had to come in contact with somebody. Unfortunately, sometimes people still don't believe that. Everybody wants to believe the funny joke they see on television, but then when they're right there in front of you, it's not funny anymore. And all of a sudden we're not real anymore.
Right. I'm going to pause on something, because this is so important, I think, for our viewers to really understand that, COVID, quarantine, all of that was very hard on our world. But I want them to understand how much more difficult it was for people with disabilities. You know, your example is unbelievably, more powerful than the irritation of somebody that just couldn't leave their house. Or yes, of course, we all missed our family members, but it took a physical, mental toll on you that is very serious, dangerous, I'm sure, in some cases. And that's really important for our world to know how exponentially more damaging something like this can be for people with disabilities. And I always like to relate it back to my world, that my son actually wound up in the hospital because the lack of moving, of going to school, that is his exercise. That is walking the halls of school. So with muscular dystrophy, your muscles atrophy if you don't use them. So things that I'm sure that the general public doesn't think about, or other parents not sending their kids to school, it got him into the hospital because he was losing ridiculous amounts of weight. He wasn't moving. He's lost capacity. So it affects people with disabilities in a much more profound way. And I, think that people really need to understand and honor that I give you, so much more, compassion, that it's not easy. And for something that's not easy for the world is even more difficult for you.
Right.
So I'm happy that hopefully things are getting better, and you're being able to be with your family and all of that. So before we move into getting to know you a little bit better, can you tell everyone about a little bit more about the Tourette Association of America and the tic disorder community, maybe how they can get involved if they didn't know of it? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can start by they have their website. It's just tourette.org. You can they have so much information on their website. They have stuff about chapters. So there's chapters in a lot of states across the United States where you can get in touch with people who are children with Tourette syndrome, parents of children with Tourette syndrome, because sometimes it's just nice to hear somebody understanding and going through the same thing. They can get you in contact with these support groups. You can go and you can contact them and basically tell them whatever you're looking for. You're just trying to learn more. You are the person with Tourette syndrome. You're the spouse of somebody with Tourette syndrome, whatever that might be.
Equally as important, right? You're the sibling of, you're the spouse of, you're the mother of.
Yes, absolutely.
Mother of.
And so they have so many things, and they've been doing so many webinars, especially over this last year. So they had webinars of how to deal with tics and during COVID and all of these things, and how the vaccine could or could not possibly affect those that have Tourette syndrome, because people obviously had that worry. We never know what's going to make our tics worse or not sometimes. They have all this researching that they're doing, and they talk about that on their website. And you can find them on basically any social media platform. You find them on Instagram, Facebook. I believe they have a YouTube channel, and they do all these fundraising events. They have I believe next year is their 50th anniversary, which is really exciting. So they're going to be having their conference, and it's hopefully planning on being in person next year. And I plan to be there myself as well. Where they'll have all of these different things. We had our virtual conference in May. I was lucky enough to help kick off the conference with two other amazing Tourette people, the host of Tourette podcast and A.D. Smith, who also has Tourette syndrome. And I was so humbled and blessed to be a part of that. But all these groups to help people of all ages with Tourette syndrome, it's their goal to help us and find more research. And it's just an amazing group. I can't say enough positive things about them.
Amazing. Really encourage anyone out there that wants to learn more, please go check out the association. And if anybody wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, absolutely. They can find me basically anywhere as well. A lot of my Tourette handles, I guess I'll say, is one tic at a time. You can find me on Twitter with that. My Facebook is One Tick at a Time. I have a TikTok with One Tick at a Time. Other than that, you can just find me as Britney Wolf on anything else. I welcome any and everyone to ask me questions, those within the Tourette community, outside of it. I'm an open book with this. So
great. Well, I am so grateful that you came on the show. I learned so much. I could talk to you for like the rest of the day, but I want people to really kind of know a little bit more about you. As we're doing in season 3, it's really about moments. So I would love to know, what is one of your happiest memories?
I think most of my happiest memories, aside from like the usual, if I would say like my wedding day and all that stuff, family dinners in and outside of holidays, family game nights. And when I'm there with them, there's times where I just sit back and think, man, how lucky am I to have this? Just last year, we lost my pap, and it was very, very difficult for all of us, still difficult. And we all went over to help my grandma with yard work. We were raking leaves and everything. And, you know, we're all having a good time, and we mess around with each other and like pick on each other and all that stuff. And we were inside and we were all just like laughing. We're like messing with each other. And there was a moment where everybody was just laughing, and I don't know, it hit me so strongly. Like, I am so happy to have this. Like, my family just got even stronger somehow without losing like this monumental person in our lives. And we were able to cling harder rather than fall apart, which I know how it can often happen. And just those moments with my family, they're my favorite moments in the world.
How beautiful. I love that so much, because you don't have to look anywhere else outside of your world, your family, your support. And that is just treasured. I loved hearing that. Tell us about a moment that you would love to forget, whether it's embarrassing or something funny that happened.
Oh man. I was just thinking about this the other day. I was talking to somebody about it. I would like to forget, and this is super random that I'm even remembering. One time when we were going grocery shopping, my husband and I, and he dropped me off at the door because it was pouring outside. Like, it was like just raining so hard, coming down sideways. So he dropped me off at the door so I wouldn't have to get as wet. And so, you know, you're still outside for a little bit. So I'm running in, and I'm in between those double doors, and I slip and fall in front of all these people waiting for their car.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
And when I get up to try and pretend like, you know, that didn't hurt, I see my sister-in-law standing right there who happened to be there at the same time. And I was just so embarrassed. It was one of those moments where I'm like, nope, I'm okay. It didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. Just keep going. And then when he came in, I'm like, we need to go inside right now.
100%. I love that so much. And just so you know, one time I tucked my skirt into my underwear and didn't realize that, and promptly left the bathroom and paraded around for quite some time with the draftiness of the back. That's a memory I'd like to forget.
I bet.
And then finally, can you tell us about a moment that you cannot wait for it to happen?
Yes. I am in the middle of getting my book published, and I cannot wait to hold my book in my hands. This has been a dream of mine.
I'd like to hold it too.
Yes. This has been a dream of mine since I was a little girl. I have always wanted to write a book about my life with Tourette Syndrome. I got a publishing contract this past year, and it's supposed to be out hopefully next year. We're in editing phases right now, and I've always said, I'm like, I just want to see a book with my name on the cover. I just hold it in my hand. So I cannot
wait too. I love that we all get to be a part of the moment that you can't wait for. We're equally as excited.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, it was so wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. You're just a delight, and I cannot wait to see how you light up this world.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a fun conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Good. Wonderful. If you would like to be on the Gamut Network, please email us at talent@gamutmanagement.com to find out how you can be a guest. Also, please don't forget to follow us on social media at Gamut Management, as well as follow us on YouTube at the Gamut Network. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.